Oculus started as a short film in 2005. I'd been doing little independent mini DV features that were all primarily collegiate relationship dramas, which were not really very interesting to anybody other than me. But I've always loved horror. I read every word Stephen King writes. I collect horror movies. So I had finally gotten to a place where I really wanted to try my hand at a horror film. Trying to figure out what that story would be was one of the biggest challenges that Jeff Howard and I had to deal with when we first had conversations about expanding it. And when we hit on the idea of, instead of one character having it be siblings that have a disagreement about these events in their past that have led them to do this, opened the door right up to, okay, and then we also get to see what happened in their childhood. And if there's a way to have those two storylines be really cleverly braided together, so that even though we think we know, and we're told in the beginning, how that story of their childhood was going to end, that we could still create suspense and still surprise people with the details of that resolution at the end. So once we kind of came to that place, it became really fun. Oculus, to me, is as much a movie about a family tragedy as it is about a haunted mirror. That's just kind of the prism through which we see this story. Oculus is different from other horror films because of the attention that it pays to its characters. This is a movie that's populated by complicated, flawed, real human beings that we are meant to really connect with, so that when the genre elements kick in and when things start to get really frightening, we're legitimately worried for their safety. The mirror is absolutely a character into itself, and the thing about mirrors that creeps me out is that we take for granted that a reflection in a mirror is objective and representative of the world as we understand it, and it isn't. Every mirror is flawed in some way. Every reflection we see is distorted. Our entire vision that we have internally of ourselves, of our faces, is backwards. We've only ever really encountered ourselves in this reflected world that isn't representative of reality. And the idea that that world that we take for granted, that we surround ourselves with in our cars, in our bathrooms, on our sunglasses, like the idea that this reflected world that we've come to assume is completely normal, could be sinister, is something that I think is really fascinating. The thing about Kaylee is that, unlike most horror movie heroines, she's not coming at it from a place of vulnerability at first. It's like horror movies tend to present their leading ladies as often these very, virginal, kind of perfect characters, and then it's about putting that innocence in danger. That's kind of one of the main engines of horror. For us, it's very different because Kaylee is this ambitious, driven, obsessed character who you need to question her sanity for a little bit. When we started the casting process and were reading actresses, I was chasing Annie McCarthy, our casting director, about Karen Gillan. I was like, I'd really, really love to get this in front of Karen Gillan. I think she'd be perfect. So for weeks, I think months actually, Karen was working on Doctor Who. We had sent the script. They had promised she was going to put herself on tape and send us an audition for it. And at every casting session, I would finish it off and we'd evaluate the actresses who had come in, and then I'd say, did we ever get the Karen Gillan tape? We need to chase that. Can we chase Karen Gillan, please? And it became a joke. And being such a fanboy of Doctor Who, it just kind of became this funny thing where I was really, really obsessed with getting Karen into this movie. Finding an actor who had that vulnerability, that youth, but also this sense of someone who had been through that kind of intense darkness was a real challenge. And Brenton is this enormously charismatic actor. Uh, you know, he's not hard to look at whatsoever, but he has this, you know, incredible vulnerability to him that just kind of comes across from his first scene. The voice that we discussed for that character was Katee Sackhoff. I was a huge fan of Battlestar Galactica. I thought she was an incredible actor, one of the strongest actresses that I'd ever seen. And I thought that she was kind of the perfect voice for this movie. As the years went by and the story evolved and things changed, we were starting to look for actresses for Marie who were very matronly, very motherly, and very soft. And when we found out Katee was available and had gotten the script to her and she had responded to the material, it suddenly opened up this whole other vision of what Marie could be, which is there is that softness, there is that maternal energy to her, but there's this strength underneath all of it. Rory I'd been a fan of since Empire Records and Dazed and Confused. And I've always kind of pictured Rory as this kind of warm, quirky, you know, unusual but endearing and kind of fascinating guy. The idea of him going on this dark journey and tapping into that insanity was really fascinating to me.